So, good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to have this opportunity to meet with all of you. And I'm just going to give a shortish overview of the principles upon which schools with which I'm involved in Thailand are developing. And then to open it up for some conversation, discussion. So, first of all, I like to consider the religions of the world as resolving into a number of different families. And as you know, the prestige, and you could probably say the arrogance of Western culture, Western hegemony of the past 100 years, has meant that many Western ideas have become to be seen as universal. And I think it leads to a lot of misunderstandings. So it's quite common to talk about religion as it's just this one thing called religion. All religions are basically the same thing. And people say, well, religion is this and religion is that. So for most people brought up in the West, religions are, I say, essentially belief systems. You may have observed that over the past many years, the word faith and the word religion have been used almost interchangeably in English language. We say the Christian religion or the Christian faith. So that in itself points to the centrality of faith. And we can say that membership of the family of religions that grew up in the Middle East, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, is defined as by whether or not you can believe in the basic tenets of the religion. So when all religions are considered to conform to this basic pattern, then Buddhism becomes rather unintelligible. And so you have to say, well, it's not really a religion, it's a philosophy or it's a way of life. And so, but my proposition is that Buddhism is indeed a religion, but it's a different from a different family or a different species of religion. So rather than being essentially a belief system, it is essentially an education system. So this is a very different idea of what a religion is. Saying a religion is an education system. Well, what does that really mean? Well, if we look at the teachings of the Buddha, traditionally resolved into what we call the Eightfold Path. That Eightfold Path is commonly reduced into three headings we call Sila, Samadhi, and Panya. So Sila is conduct, and Samadhi in this particular context does not refer to mental concentration, mental stability, but refers more generally to the mind, the heart, and Panya is wisdom. Now these three headings, these three categories, are referred to as Sikha, and Sikha, S-I-K-K-H-A, means education or training. So the Buddhist teachings have been most commonly resolved into three areas of education, three areas of training: the training of conduct, the training of the heart, and the training of wisdom. So this is the, first we say, most comprehensive, kind of holistic system of development I think that the world has ever seen. Now in Thailand, when there was this first move towards developing a Buddhist educational model, then this was considered the obvious starting point: the education of conduct, the education of the heart, and the education of wisdom. Now, when I became involved in this movement, which is not a big movement to be frank, the problem that came across immediately was that many parents were concerned that an education for their children based upon these three categories, or in other words, the Eightfold Path, would result in their children becoming good, kind people, but perhaps unequipped to deal with life in a sort of cutthroat economic system which stresses competition and ruthlessness even. So it sounded too overtly, too religious, and not realistic enough. So we had to make it very clear that we're not advocating an education system which would measure success by the number of graduates that became monks and nuns. That's not at all the goal. But the view here is that the mainstream educational models and systems are not meeting fully the needs of children, or indeed teachers and parents, and that particularly the emotional well-being of the children is often overlooked. The development of the children becomes rather unbalanced, and you get some very, let's say, high IQ, smart people, but with very low emotional maturity levels, and many different problems coming in their family life and in their working life. And it seems to be that the education system giving is not covering all the bases. So it's our belief that the Buddhist system, which if followed to its ultimate level, and in all of its aspects, can take an ordinary unenlightened human being to enlightenment, can also be utilized as a framework or as a model for the education of ordinary householders in the world. That is to say, that the same basic principles applied appropriately to an ordinary conventional education system can provide a much better education than is generally being provided. Now, one of the solutions that I came up with to deal with this general kind of wariness or suspicion that this is kind of too religious, and it's not, and that it would pursuing this path would inevitably result in some compromise of academic excellence. So I felt that the words that were being used, using the traditional Buddhist vocabulary of Sila, Samadhi, Panya, unnecessarily alienated a number of parents and people who otherwise might be very interested. So I went back to the primary texts, to the teachings of the Buddha, and I came across teaching on 4 kinds of development. The word is actually bhavana, which you might be familiar with, B-H-A-V-A-N, long A, bhavana, which is often a word that is used in meditational contexts, but in fact it means development. And in this particular teaching, the Buddha takes this threefold training or threefold education and just puts a little twist on it, as great teachers do every now and again, just to freshen things up. And so he talked about the human relationship to the material world, the human relationship to the social world, and then the heart and wisdom. And so he used the word heart as opposed to samadhi, which for many people just immediately is conceived as a teaching of having the children sit with their eyes closed and meditating. So I took this as a basic framework for our schools. We're saying we're trying to provide an education of the human relationship to the material world, the human relationship to the social world, and there's the 2 external aspects and 2 internal aspects, the emotions and the heart and the wisdom. And so in the first of those four headings, then we start off with the most intimate and direct relationship with the material world is our relationship to our own bodies. So developing a clear understanding of the correct and wise relationship that we should have to our bodies. So this would include things like human biology, sex instruction in terms of sex education at appropriate ages, but also teaching nutrition and exercise, sports. All these things will be involved in what is the correct way or the wisest way that we deal with this our physical existence. And then if you can imagine a concentric spheres, and expanding from that, the next sphere is your relationship with the material world surrounding you. So how you relate to your possessions, how you relate to money, how you relate to technology, how do you relate to the internet, all these things that the material world that we deal with on a daily basis. And then the third and outer ring or sphere of interest would be our relationship to the environment, and so bringing up the ecology and our responsibilities towards the natural world. So within those 3 subheadings of relationship to the physical body, relationship to the immediate physical environment that we deal with every day, relationship to the natural environment, then various academic subjects will fit into that. So the physical sciences, obvious examples. So we're trying to find a way, like a system, a way of integrating academic disciplines with this spiritual approach. And so this would be one way of doing this, so seeing which the various academic subjects fit into these categories, these headings, in what particular way, and where in fact there may be some blind spots or things that need to be added. So the second area would be the relationship to the social world. And here the first subheading is the use of precepts and conventions and regulations and agreements in the most in a way conducive to human well-being. So just now I made a distinction, didn't I, between religions which are essentially belief systems and religions which are essentially education system. So in a belief system, religion or philosophy, then you have a great power or God or whatever, however you want to conceive him, who has transmitted his wishes, that he wants human beings to do this and not do that. And that there's usually a kind of a reward and punishment system in which this is expressed. So if you do this, you'll go to heaven. If you do that, you'll go to hell. That kind of reward and punishment presentation. So in Buddhism, we look at it from a different viewpoint. And this is something that I do with children. I think it's a really good exercise. You say, well, what is it that we really need to live together well and happily and at peace? What are the things that we bottom line? What are the needs that we have that we need to fulfill before we can live together happily and in harmony? So we can say, oh yeah, we want to live in harmony, but what are the obstacles to living in harmony, and how do we prevent them from arising, or how do we deal with them when they've already arisen? And I think that in whatever group, whatever age group or whatever environment, I think sooner or later you come to the central point of safety. We need to feel safe. Everyone needs to feel safe. If you don't feel safe, then you can say goodbye to any kind of any more elevated spiritual development. If you're living, you may have a fully enlightened teacher. You may live in a beautiful, quiet place, very conducive for meditation. But if the surrounding area is full of thieves and robbers and violent people, then whenever your child is out of the house, you're going to be stressed out. You're not going to be able to meditate very well. If you don't feel personally safe, or your loved ones are not safe, then it's very difficult to thrive as a human being, as families. So we say, okay, we're agreed on this. We all want to feel safe. But how do we create a feeling of safety in families and in communities? And, how do you go about that? What are the causes and conditions for it? And the Buddhist answer is we look at human nature, human psychology, and we can make an observation that there are certain things that respond to volition and certain things that don't. So, for instance, we cannot get up in the morning and say, oh, I'm going to spend the whole day just feeling love and compassion for all beings, and I'm not going to get angry with anybody. You could perhaps say that to yourself, but you wouldn't be successful, because you cannot prevent yourself from feeling negative emotions through an act of will. You can't just decide that I'm not going to ever get angry ever again, I'm never going to get jealous ever again, I'm never. You can't do that. You can't make yourself feel a certain way. But what you can do is you can say that today even if I lose my temper, even if I feel irritated, upset with my fellow workers or the children or whatever, I will not express that anger physically or verbally. I won't abuse anybody physically or verbally. And that is not overly idealistic. It is something that we can all do. So we do have this power not to follow our emotions, not to follow our instincts in certain occasions. So let's say you walk into a room and you see something of some value perhaps, and you know that you could take that and nobody would ever know. There's no cameras, there's nobody around, nobody knows you're here. You're absolutely convinced that you could take this. You want it, you want to take it, you could take it without being caught, but you don't. I don't think anybody here, you don't. Why? Well, it wouldn't be right. It wouldn't be fair on the owner. I feel sorry for them. So here it's a very simple, straightforward example that we have certain drives and wishes just like any other living being, any other animal. But what makes human beings special is we can stand back from those instincts and we can choose not to follow them. I don't think animals can do that. I don't think you could train a cat not to jump on a mouse. Even if you could speak cat language, where you could communicate with the cat, because the cat doesn't have that reflexive ability, doesn't have the ability to stand back from its needs, its desires, and decide whether or not to follow them. But human beings, we can do this. So what we're saying is we can, as a group, we can make this promise to our family and the people around us. Yeah, sometimes, I really love you. You know I do. But sometimes, I get really angry. And sometimes I want to swear at you. Sometimes I want to hit you even. Sometimes it happens. I don't know. It's just the way it is. But I promise I will never abuse you, physically or verbally. Now, if someone says that to you, how do you feel? You relax. You feel safe, don't you? It's not someone saying, I love you and I'll never ever get angry with you. It's not true, is it? You tend to get angry with the people you love more than the people you don't, because you've got much higher expectations of them. That what they do means so much more to you, brings up more emotion. But then by making these promises, I will train myself. I'm going to devote I will not abuse you physically or verbally. I will not take anything that doesn't belong to me, even if it's something that I really want. You say to your partner, to your husband, to your wife, you say that, yeah, I'm just normal human being. Sometimes I see other women, other men, they look really beautiful, they look really handsome. Maybe I feel some liking there, but I promise you, I will never act upon that. I will never speak with a mind full of those kinds of desires. So you're not taking it too high. You're the only person in the world. You're the only beautiful person in the world. I have eyes for no one but you. And that might be true when you're first in love, but it doesn't last forever. Sometimes you do. You see other people, they're attractive. You feel attracted to them. But when you take a precept, you say you're not going to give any importance to those feelings. You're not going to feed them. You're not going to act upon them. So it's a very practical standard. But if your spouse, your boyfriend, your girlfriend makes that kind of promise to you, and you believe that they're sincere about it, you can relax, can't you? You just feel safe. And so when you promise you're not going to lie, whether it's because you want something or because you're afraid of losing something, you're afraid someone won't like you, but you're not going to lie under any circumstances. Everyone around you feels safe. So these four, these are quite straightforward. The one that's often more difficult, the fifth one, to refrain from alcohol and any kind of drugs. But if you don't keep the fifth one, it's very hard to keep the other four, because when you drink, your sense of your responsibility, your restraint, it goes out the window, and you can't be sure that you can keep your other promises. So, if you keep these 5 precepts, the Buddha called this Mahadana. So it's like the great gift. You see, because you see that the most fundamental thing that we, as social beings, that we desire in family life, social life, is safety. When you keep precepts, you're giving the gift of safety to all around you. And the Buddha says that's the greatest gift. So now we're going beyond this idea of commandments and things you do out of a sense of fear or obedience, but you're taking on these precepts as a way of training your conduct, being mindful in daily life of how to live up to your obligations and your ideals. So I've expanded on this a bit too much in this particular context, but I think it's an important point that we're teaching children and teaching ourselves also how we can skillfully use precepts and agreements as a way of living skillfully in the world and in being able to live together in harmony and to work together constructively. And I just say to children at school, don't think that there are all these school regulations that you have to. These aren't the school's regulations. These are your regulations. You have to own them. You have to really see how these regulations, these conventions, these agreements support you in your studies, support you in your life together, because that's what they're there for. They're not just for the purposes of control. They're designed to create the most conducive environment for everyone to flourish. Flourish as teachers, flourish as students, flourish as parents, or whatever. So in this overall education, this whole area of how we can learn to live together as a group using precepts, using agreements and conventions as skillful tools. Secondly is the whole area of communication, developing good communication skills. And I don't know in India, but I presume it's somewhat similar in Thailand. Just so many unnecessary problems arising, again, whether in your family or in institutions and right through society, where people just lack the most basic intelligence and skills in communication. And the third heading for this is encouraging, instilling in the children our wish to create benefit for the wider community and for the society at large, to want to contribute something, to give back to something, to make their country, the whole world a better place. So that not just I'm here to get to pass my exams and get into college or to get a good job, but opening up to our responsibility to each other and to the world at large. So in this development of the relationship of the human being to the social world, like the 3 subheadings here that we make are the using precepts and as a means of training and skillful means to create the best possible environments for whatever we might be involved in. So it's intelligent manipulation of the external environment. Then developing communication skills, and the developing the wish and the skills to help others. So those are the two, and in that area, then academic disciplines, sociology, history, so all this people-based, society-based topics and subjects. So in the inner development of the child, then we take the basic concepts of Buddhist concepts of dividing mental states into two large groups we call wholesome or unwholesome. And the definition of this, or good and bad. So, this is an interesting question itself, isn't it? What does it mean when we use the word good? It should be a good person. Well, what does it mean to be a good person? There's so many different views, aren't there, of what it means to be good. So I would say the way to define what you mean, or what we mean by good, is to ask the question, what is the best? What is the ultimate? And then the good is defined as that which leads towards or is in harmony with the highest or the best. And then what is bad is that which leads away from it. So in Buddhism, what do we take to be the highest goal? Well, the highest goal is enlightenment, but then what does that mean? That's not so clear. So we can look at the Buddha. So the Buddha was the fully enlightened one. And what are the qualities, those things that express his Buddhahood most fully, most clearly? And there are three qualities that have been traditionally expounded upon. One is Buddha's great wisdom. Second is Buddha's great compassion. And the third is his purity, freedom from defilement. So therefore, I would propose that from a Buddhist point of view, anything which increases wisdom, compassion, purity of heart is on the side of the good. Anything which leads away to that and leads to foolishness and delusion, to cruelty and kindness, leads to being the slave of mental states defined, those things are on the bad side. So in the development of the heart, we have four challenges. First is the challenge is, how do you look after your mind in such a way that the unwholesome or the negative or bad mental states cannot arise within it? Secondly, given the fact that you're unlikely to have 100% success rate with that, how do you deal with negative mental states that have already arisen? Thirdly, how do you introduce into the mind the wholesome, the good, the virtuous mental states that have not yet arisen? And fourthly, when those have arisen or start to arise, how do you take care of them? How do you nourish them? How do you bring them to maturity? So those are the four areas of interest in the development of the heart, is in this system. So the kinds of negative mental states that obviously come into play, and which we meet in school a lot, are things like children, as we get, particularly as children get into teenage years, but also younger and younger, real problems with childhood depression, anxiety, children lacking ability to be still and to be concentrated, very short attention spans, children being distracted, and then there's things that come up a lot. Children are bored, they don't like what they're doing, they lack patience. And so these are all negative mental qualities which once arisen in the mind play havoc with their lives and play havoc with their studies. So how do we teach the children to look after their minds in such a way to prevent those kind of states from arising? If they do arise, how can we advise them to deal with them effectively? Then what are the kinds of positive mental states that we want to encourage in the children? Things like patience and kindness and mental calm and clarity, etc. How do we go about that? And once they're arisen, how do we encourage them? And it's in this area that some formal meditation practice can be very helpful, and mindfulness exercises in daily life, but just generally bringing up these emotional qualities, the negative and the positive, examining them and talking about them and sharing means of dealing with them. Fourth area of wisdom then starts off with basic critical thinking, creative thinking, just being able to use the mind free of prejudice and from there we can also develop slightly, there are specifically Buddhist reflections that can, at appropriate occasions, appropriate levels, can be used to deal with the mind and to bring the mind to a clearer vision of oneself and others. So wisdom covering everything from basic mental hygiene, using thinking, using intellect well, going on to more subtle forms of reflection, and even in some cases perhaps to the highest use of wisdom faculty, which would be vipassana and understanding the true nature of things. But that was unlikely to play a major role, of course, in a normal education system. So I've gone on rather a long time, but it's just to recap. So looking at the overall comprehensive holistic education of human being as composed of an education of the way that we relate to the material world, the way we relate to the social world, our emotions, and our wisdom faculty. So, does anyone have any comments they would like to make, or anything they would like to? Was that clear? Was there anything that was not?
I wanted to ask something for my own clarification. So, in the course of this framework, you mentioned that that children learn to get there are agreements, and we have to abide by agreements rather than norms when nobody is watching us. So the question about that that I had that everyone may not have agreements on same matter. There will be disagreements also.
Yeah.
So how do we arrive at common agreements that we all want to abide to?
Yeah, thank you. One of the things that I really support is in families to begin with, like family constitution. So for all the family members to get together and just make some agreements about how we want to live together as a family. What are our family values? What are the things we want to uphold in the family? What are our duties and responsibilities to each other? And to let the children have their own say in this. So everything is agreed upon by all the members of the family. So it takes some time to do this. But then you can have this printed out and framed and put on the wall. This is our family constitution that we've all signed up on. And then you don't have to, ideally, you don't have to keep coming back to the same things again and again and again and again. And it's not some kind of power struggle between the parent and the child. It's like, well, we've all signed up for this. It's, it's a matter of, whether you're living up to the promises that you made and the commitments that you made. So I think it can be a very skillful means of dealing with these kind of petty conflicts that come up in families when everyone has agreed to certain standards and certain protocols and conventions. In a school, I suggested at the beginning of a school term, you say, well, why are we here? What are we doing here? So, okay, we're here to study, aren't we? And we're here to, we want to enjoy each other's company, maybe we want to have a good time, but first priority is we're here to learn. So what agreements do we need to make sure that everyone can have that opportunity to learn? You say, as a teacher, I find it really frustrating if I'm writing on the board and people are chatting behind my back and not paying attention. It's hurtful for me after I put so much time into preparing the lesson. And for me, I would really appreciate an agreement where when I'm writing on the board or when I'm talking, nobody chats. So what does everyone else think? Is that unreasonable? You really give people the chance to. But then if everybody can say, yeah, that makes sense. That's one thing that will help our lessons to go better. Then, this is our first agreement. And then what about any other children? Anybody else has something that they think would really help us to work together well in this? And then if you have, so say this is our stand. This is our constitution, and then you can have at the end everyone has to speak up and say, my name is, and I agree to this constitution. So you make this verbal commitment in the group, and that's very powerful as well. And then every couple of weeks you can have someone read it out just to remind everybody, because we all forget these things. And so I'm not saying it's like that's the end of all your problems in the classroom, but I think it's quite. So of course, at the end of the day, you're the teacher, and you have the power ultimately. It's not like everyone has an equal voice. You're the leader of the community if you're a teacher. But I think it's when you give people a sense of ownership and participation that things really start to move forward well.
So this constitution that you were talking about, whether at home or in the classroom, should it also just have some beliefs in the beginning, like as a family, the beliefs that you have, or
why not?
As a class, I mean, just
I prefer to talk in terms of values. But
values actually. Sorry, not beliefs.
Values. We're our family. We believe in honesty and integrity, and something like that.
And then have
particular applications of it.
That's a great idea, by the way. Thank you.
So recently I felt about when you start working on that path, but others don't want to. So sometimes it's become a contradiction between a disagreement because they have their own things and you are following certain rules. So how we can remove that conflict, or how we can decrease that differences between us?
Sorry, in what context?
Suppose I start not to lie, but still they are lying on something, and I'm aware they are lying. So sometimes it's become a contradiction between us.
Yeah, well, I think once you have a community, you have to have regular meetings. This is something that we found in the monastery, and particularly with monastics, because we always tend to be monastics, quite high-minded people generally. And then, but any kind of community life, you always have little things, like little niggly things that you think, well, I'm a monk, I'm a nun, or I shouldn't really be bothered about such a small, silly thing. But you are, frankly you are. But there's never, often there's never like a forum in which you can bring these things up. So you just keep sort of pushing them down. Everybody's doing it. And then suddenly you find the atmosphere is kind of like, it's not what it was. So I think it's really good that you have like a monastery, like once every 2 weeks or something, we sit around in a circle and they say, well, has anything come up, So it's not, often it's not things that are so important you want to sort of, look, I can't take this anymore, but it's like, last couple of weeks I've really been a bit concerned about this and about that. So you can get it off your chest and you can put it out there and people can, so it's not the things that you want to be talking about every day and all the time because you feel like you're nagging and you don't want to make a fuss. But I think it's important that you have a forum, you have a particular day or a particular time when I can bring this kind of thing up that you're not very happy about, and whether it's speech and people. But in the case where you have like a constitution, we're all going to tell the truth as much as we can. Then reading out the constitution. And so it seems to me that, I may be wrong here, but it seems to me that you're not following your commitment. Is that fair? Would you agree with that or not? But I think that what you're trying to avoid is this kind of, particularly when you get not so much small children, it's children where you get into this kind of rebellious thing, that you just want to rebel against authority. And you don't want to be that authority figure that people are rebelling against. And when it's made clear that it's not the teacher or someone who's telling you what to do, so you have a choice of either being like sheep and just following on, or else sort of mindlessly rebelling. But this is your agreements for your benefit, and it's not for my benefit. So if you've made this kind of commitment, do you have problems about living up to it? Don't you find it valid anymore? You can use it. You can have some really good conversations around this. Is that answering your?
Yeah.
So what you described, it would work where people have agreed on a constitution, or you're living in a community where everyone has a shared set of values. But sometimes you're not in that kind of a setting, right? You're living in families where people have divergent values, or you're living in a society where people again have different set of values. So people haven't signed up on a constitution, and they have, like, just taking this example, they have not agreed to not lie.
Yeah.
Right? You're around people who think lying is fine and it's okay, but you are trying to follow a certain path. So just to extend that question,
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I'm not sure whether I really answered certainly in that context. No, so I've been focusing more on families, our own families, and say to school where we have a certain amount of power to institute this kind of thing. But in general in society, it's not like that. So how do you deal with that? I have a number of thoughts share about that. And one is, when we meet some kind of injustice or bad behavior, and people, particularly people who are above us, who have power over us, there are two kinds of reaction, I think. One is that there's just anger and injustice and just so you get really miserable about it or depressed about it or angry. But people who tend to react in that way, when they're in that position, they tend to do the same thing. But the other, I think, wiser thing is like, that's so unjust, that's so unfair, that's so, where if I'm ever in that position, I at least will not do that. And you can actually feel uplifted by it in a way. As I know as you get older, so you look back on influences and examples in your life, and I would say in many cases, the bad examples have had a better, more positive influence than the good examples, in the sense that it's such a good example. I don't ever want to be that person. I don't ever want to be like that. I'm absolutely going to avoid, and it's a really good thing. Also, if you're in a corrupt organization, then maintaining your standard of honesty and integrity in the midst of that is tough. But and I know in Thailand we have a lot of problems like this. But when you go up, you're there and you go up the ladder, then that's just such an incredible gift for all those below you. If you look up in a hierarchical organization and you see someone up there, just one person, and that person has got all the way up there without corruption, then you think, oh, there's hope for me. I can do this. And it doesn't, even if there's 6 or 7 people, there's only one of them, but this is the proof that it can be done. Because that's the doubt, if you're in a corrupt organization, there's a feeling that there's just no alternative. It's the only way you can really. So people who do keep their principles and just deal with it, and it's not so easy, but it's also a great gift to people coming afterwards. I think that in when you're young, you don't have much choice about your job, and you're just happy to have a job basically, and sometimes you end up having to make compromises. But as you get older, you can choose more, and then make those good choices. And if you're in an environment and you're in a career where you feel it's very hard to live your life in a way that you can feel respect for yourself and feel some pride, and in your job, it's better to find something else. But certainly I'm aware when you're starting out in working life, you don't have that many options usually. But it's just trying to do the best you can and don't take the easy way out, and just understand, this is, if you look on like defilements and things like greed and hatred and prejudice and all these things as like viruses, then I think that's helpful. Rather than saying, oh, that person, he's so this and she's so that, I just can't, I think, oh, that poor person has got that virus that's taken over them, and that's what that virus does, and actually I got a little bit of that virus in myself as well, you see that. So rather than making this kind of, me and them and the good and the bad, you're just seeing how the way that so much of it is dependent on these negative mental states that just take over people's minds because they don't have the resources, they don't have the mindfulness and the maturity to be able to protect themselves from them and to let them go.
So, again, I'm just asking the follow-up question. So, I just want a little bit clarity about what is my role in it. So, I experience both the way when I speak out for that. So, it's a rebellious situation. When I keep mum on that situation, that thought is like if I keep mum for a long period, that thought is like empowering on me, like, and it's bothering me. So both the ways, like,
which thought?
If like somebody lies, and it's like if I speak out on that, so that situation is get rebellious. And when I keep mum and just,
can you be more specific? Are you talking about children or your family?
No, I'm just talking about in the family setting.
In the family setting, someone lies to you.
Yeah. So when I'm telling that this something is not acceptable, so that's a rebellious situation. When I just keep mum and accepting that lie for a long period, so that's like that lies is like empowering me at a certain point of time, right?
Well, for any kind of communication to take place, then first of all you need to create the foundation for that, which is trust. So if you're going to speak to somebody about something that they don't want to hear, which would be painful or embarrassing for them to hear, you have to be very careful about choosing the right time and the right place, and to ask yourself whether there is sufficient trust there for you to be able to say this or not. Sometimes there might not be, and it's just better to keep mum for the time being. But also you have to be able to speak in a way that doesn't sound accusing and doesn't sound judgmental, but is expressing your hurt that you feel. So this is one of the classic kind of principles of good communication, is you start off from what is objectively out there, being very precise. Don't ever accuse somebody of being a certain way. You are always like this. Your personality is like that. So when you make these kind of universal judgments about people, then it doesn't work. Someone just puts up their defenses straight away, or they feel that you're being unfair to them. But if you say, like, yesterday afternoon, when I asked you this, and you said that, in fact it was like this, and I felt really hurt when I realized that you hadn't told me the truth. So you're not saying you're a liar, or you like to tell lies, you have no respect for me. You're not making these like really big judgments. You're just saying, when you said this, like this, this is how I felt. So it's like you're saying, you're just giving them some information, just to let you know how I'm feeling about this. And it may be, every now and again, it might be that you got it wrong and you misunderstood. And that gives that person the chance to explain, well, actually, no, it wasn't like that. So, sometimes you get into these big emotional things, and then it turns out you got the wrong information, or you got the wrong end of the stick, and then, you destroy your relationship or something unnecessarily. So, in the context of living in family, these are people you're going to be living with for the rest of your life. So, this is finding skillful means of talking to them. And, if you're a child talking to a parent, then there's all kinds of stuff going on. And no parent's going to want to feel that their child is teaching them, what's right and what's wrong. So you have to be able to reassure them that you're speaking with respect, and that you ask for permission. This is, in fact, in the monk's discipline, in the way that we live. If you're going to give feedback to someone, you always have to ask permission first. So you say, I have some problem, said something, would it be all right? Can I speak to you about this? Can I give you some feedback? But, just to give people feedback without giving them that option. If somebody says, no, I don't want to hear about this right now, well, then you have to respect that sometimes.
So you mentioned that we cannot prevent ourselves from feeling negative emotions.
Yeah.
But is there a way to not let these emotions overpower you?
Yes. So, so I didn't go into the whole thing. I was just certain kind of highlights. So, first of all, certain negative emotions just pop up into your mind. Okay, so why? Why would they pop up into your mind? So the obvious answer is because they popped up into your mind in the past, and it's developed a kind of a habit. But when these things pop up into our mind, in Buddhism we say this is the result of old karma, meaning because we've spoken this way and we've invested in this kind of emotions before, then you create like a habit, and that's the karma, the habit. Now, if that arises in your mind, then what tends to happen is either you feed it by grasping onto it and making a story out of it, which makes it even stronger. That's quite clear. But there's a second way of feeding it, and that's by trying to get rid of it. Oh, I shouldn't think that, it's bad. Go away, I'm a bad person. And that feeds it also. The way that you prevent it, that you don't feed it, is you're simply aware of it as the result of previous thoughts and previous emotions and previous situations, and you just recognize it. It's just that much. And if you can be just aware of it, accepting of it, not fighting it, not taking pleasure in it, then it's weakened. And you will notice if you do this again and again and again, it becomes less and less, weaker and weaker, and gradually passes away. But in certain cases, there's something that's very deeply rooted through some kind of trauma or something that's just you've invested so much in, that you also, another strategy is that you consciously develop the positive mental states that directly oppose that. So in the case of you have a lot of anger against somebody, resentment against somebody, and the moment you think of them, it all comes out. Then doing this, we have loving kindness meditations, where we're constantly sending sorts of goodwill and forgiveness towards that person. So you're creating like a new habit in your mind, a habit of kindness and forgiveness. And there comes a point where that new habit becomes stronger than the old habit, and then it's more likely to come up in its place. So mindfulness is, again, keep coming back to mindfulness as being absolutely central, because mindfulness means you know what's going on in your body and your mind. So before you have, like let's say that thing pops up in your mind, if you lack mindfulness, it's too late. You've already gone with it. You've already, when he did this or she said that, and it's too late. But when you have mindfulness, it's that kind of alertness, and the moment it arises, you say, oh yeah, and then you let it go. So unless you have that kind of sharpness of mind, then it becomes just like an ideal, but you lack the resources and the mental clarity to be able to put it into action. So patience and mindfulness, loving kindness, these are wholesome or good, positive mental states that you systematically cultivate, and they undermine the negative mental state which is in direct opposition to them.
I have a question about children. In today's world, teenagers and young adults are growing up receiving too much information at a very young age about the world around them. They are receiving this information at an age where they have not yet developed the mental and emotional maturity to understand this information, to be able to handle this information and build the right meanings out of this information. And the result of that is that they become opinionated too soon, they become too judgmental, and also these negative states of mind that you're talking about, they start occupying their mind space way too early and way too much. But this is also the age where they are really not very amenable to receiving advice from parents or teachers or in general, too many people around them. How does one support children in this?
Yeah, it's a tough one, isn't it? I think, first of all, I don't think that it's a problem restricted to the young. I mean, we can see from what's going on in the world today how much everyone is affected by this information overload. Now, if we go back 20 years ago, there was a very optimistic period where people were talking about globalization and sort of one big family and with the access to so much information, then this very prejudiced and narrow kind of mindsets and religious beliefs would kind of sort of dissolve and we'd all get on very well. But what's happened is the exact opposite. And as you know, now when people read the news and they read news from websites and things from people who have broadly the same ideas as they do, so people are not being challenged, but their prejudices and their views and their perceptions are being strengthened. And so this narrowing has taken place rather than an expansion. And because everyone can write a blog and that it's kind of an ultimate, it's almost like a nightmare democracy, and that everything can be produced by a click. So truth, falsity presented as truth appears false. You have no way of discriminating anymore. And you don't have the knowledge and the background to be able to say, oh, this is fake and this is true. Somebody sent me this is just one example. Somebody sent me a clip the other day of a news conference given by Richard Nixon about the astronauts that died on the moon's surface in the first moon landing. Well, as we know, nobody died, but now the technology is such that it can create. It was absolutely authentic. It was him talking about how sad it was, and this great project, and that they'll live forever in our hearts, and all this kind of thing. So it's the technology is more and more sophisticated now, and it's not just a problem for young people. What I think is important is that parents and teachers are taking children out into the nature, out to the city, to Wi-Fi free zones, and going camping, going out places where we just say, let's put all our devices away for a period. There's even a new word for this now. It's fasting, but not like fasting, it's phasting. So it means like giving up your phone for a certain period of time. And to have that is as an idea. It's like every now and again we need to. One thing that I really recommend is not to have your phone or your iPad or something by the side of your bed, or if you do, to have it turned off the last hour before you go to bed and the first hour in the morning, because some people will meditate and do some yoga or something and get really peaceful, and then before they go to bed, and then they just can't help it, they sort of check on who's been in touch, and then the whole mind's before they go to sleep. Or else they get up in the morning kind of fresh, and instead of going and meditating for half an hour and just starting off the day, just can't, I've got to have a look, and then, there's like 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes. So these are the really crucial times of the day, the last period of the day before you go to bed, first period in the morning. And even if you have legitimate reasons and uses for phones. I use a phone myself, but there are certain times of the day where it's really good to not to use them, and to have this concept that there's a majjhima, or concept of just right, not too much, not too little, the golden mean, and encouraging children and parents as, so your particular needs and maybe not the same as anybody else's, but they said, what's the like a good amount, what's a reasonable amount, what's the optimum amount of usage of a phone. So I do this a lot with children, like with video games. You say, well, what do you think is a like optimum amount? Not too much, not too little, just the right amount of time to spend playing video games, and have the children come up with this themselves. And so it's not that there's a right or a wrong here, but have this in your mind, that there is such a thing as too much of a good thing. And for you, what is too much of a good thing, and why would it be too much of a good thing? And what are the effects on other areas of your life in terms of your physical health, your social relationships, and so on and so forth. I would say, coming back again and again to mindfulness, that this mindfulness of your mental states is your compass needle. So if you're reading and you're on social media or so on, and you're finding that this increase of anxious, worry, depression, and so on, then that means that it's too much. You're not relating to these things in a good way. So this is something that you can experience for yourself. Do you find reading about these things that you find yourself agitated and upset, and is it really the best way to be living your life, to doing that, and to what extent we need to expose ourselves to unpleasant things going on in the world to keep ourselves informed, and when does that go beyond what we really need, and it's just upsetting ourselves unnecessarily. So I really feel that we all do have the capacity to observe ourselves and to make these kinds of calls. Even children can do that. It's the chief thing is encouraging people to look with and just what's going on right now, in your body and mind. That's absolutely fundamental virtue, I think. So, last question: what's the most difficult thing about being a teacher? So, all easy? Something difficult?
I think doing what we expect our children to do, and living up to those standards that we expect them to come
to
up
be
to.
model for them, good example. Yeah.
And I think if I would answer, I would say that becoming a learner myself.
Yeah.
That is, I think, most difficult being a teacher.
What I like about teaching is if you're only a student, it's so easy to persuade yourself that you understand things you don't understand. And it's only when you have to explain them to other people that you realize, actually I didn't understand that as well as I thought I did. So it's one of the ways you learn through teaching.
Buddhism obviously talks about non-attachment. So, are you attached to Buddhism?
I'm loyal to it. Excuse me. Did you like to say something else? No. So there are two words in the Pali language. One is upadana, and one is samadana. So upadana is what's usually translated into English as attachment. but that's kind of like just a shortened version. The idea is attachment to something is me and mine. Through ignorance of the true nature of things. That's too long, can't use that in a sentence, so we just say attachment. But then samadhana, which comes from the same root, means to take something up and to hold on to it and make use of it as appropriate. So in the ceremony of requesting the precepts, we say, for instance, panatipata veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. That word samadhiyami is from samadhana. It means like, I will uphold this practice of refraining from it. And so it's taken up consciously and with wisdom for a particular purpose. It's not something that happens just because of ignorance and because of some passion or some emotion. So, I mean, sometimes at the monastery, people say, "Oh, you're a Buddhist monk. You've got all these rules. You know, it seems like you're really attached to all the rules." And I say, well, that's kind of a difficult one to refute, isn't it? You know, what do you want me to do? Break a few rules to show that I'm not attached to them? You know, it's like I was saying, well, let's say I was to say you're attached to driving on the left-hand side of the road. You know, have you ever driven on the right-hand side of the road? Not ever? No. Well, you're attached to it. No, I mean, it's just I don't want to die. You know, you try and drive on the right-hand side of the road, you're going to be in a crash. So, yeah. So I would say there is a distinction between loyalty to something and being attached to it. So, yeah, that would be the answer. So I wouldn't say I'm attached to Buddhism in the upadana sense, but I'm just so grateful that I'm able to live the life that I have, that I've came into contact with Buddhism at such an early age and have been able to commit myself to it and to benefit from it and to share benefits with others in the way that I have.
So have you attained the goal?
Well, in the way that I've been talking about, was a comprehensive education of conduct, speech, the emotions, thinking, wisdom. So it's an ongoing education.